it's a fascinating day, because on one hand, we are dealing with a crisis of sorts, and especially with the violence in schools and in our community. On the other hand, we are actually really trying to identify factors and see what can we do about it. So I'm a clinician, I'm a child psychiatrist, I'm a forensic child psychiatrist, which means my training is basically in violence, recognizing violence, trying to predict violence if we can. And it's frustrating from me personally, having done this almost for 25 years, that even today, when we do have a violent episode in the community, there's so many people who are so polarized and blaming everybody and anybody. And that's not my role. I'm a clinician. My role is to fix things, recognize things. So hopefully by the end of today, we'll be able to collectively walk away with some of the things which we can do, understand there's a hell of a lot that we can't do. So let's focus on what we can do. So we picked up this particular topic, kids, guns, and violence, because obviously, you know, violence is violence. And we may be able to predict some aspects of it, but I want to focus on our kids and adolescents, because in the hands of kids and adolescents, these guns do become significantly much more detrimental to the society. You know, you're a veteran, you know, you're going through PTSD, you're schizophrenic, you have a violent predisposition. The whole argument is that there's certain antecedents to those behaviors. But kids are vulnerable. Adolescents are vulnerable. In some level, they're immature and they're babies. So in their hands, guns do pose to be a very different question. But that's basically what it is. So let's talk about that and see what we can come up with. I'm director of Brunswick Hospital, which is in Amityville, Long Island. And all I do for a living is identify, fix, move on, and that's the sequence of events. So the overview is that, can violence be predicted? Is there something predisposing factors or violent factor? Because we had a lot on media. Oh, shooter found, deranged mentally ill person, he should have been incarcerated, he should have been databased, and there should be a database of these people. Or he was abused, neglected, should have been picked on, or he was high. Reality is that the factors are much more complex. So what we'll focus on is an overview of what is the neurobiology behind it. Is somebody predisposed to be violent genetically or not? And then what are the predisposing factors, especially in kids and young adults? And then, if so, what are the interventions needed? And what is the role of guns? What's the role of guns? We are thankful that we live in New York. I was in Texas a while ago, series of lectures, and I was passing by driving. My driver was driving me, and I had a headache, probably from jet lag, and I told him, I need Motrin. So he said, okay, the next time I have a strip mall, I'll stop at the mall. So he stopped at this innocent-looking strip mall, you know, outside of Austin, and I went in. Before I went in, I saw this guy walk around with an AK-15 or whatever it's called. And for a moment, I froze. Like, am I in Twilight or something like that, or Breaking Bad? Am I in one of those Netflix movies? Now everything is going to explode around me and the bombs are going to fly. Everything went through my head, knowing my forensic background. And I'm pretty tough. I asked the driver, who's from Texas, can I go in? He said, absolutely. Do I have anything to fear? He says, no. I said, okay. I checked my color again, make sure I fit in, and I walked in there. Without kidding, there were 15 people in the deli / Chuck E. Cheese / KFC, whatever you want to call it, all of the above. 10 were armed. Open carry. I got my coffee, did not make eye contact, got my Motrin. Like a mouse that I am, I ran out of there, and literally without looking at anybody, for fear I might piss somebody off. and I did not want to get into an altercation or even a dialogue. So if that person's understanding was, I'm going to prevent somebody from outside to rob me, he succeeded. Not that I was going to rob anybody. If his idea was somebody's not going to confront me, he succeeded. Because he put something in me that was absolute fear. And I'm from New York. And that's the whole point. Now, so we are thankful here that we live in an area where at least we don't have to see that fearsome image every day. So from an overview, let's look at all these things. I deliberately put in this, TV violence and cyberbullying, because this seems to affect our kids a lot these days, even though, as Don said this morning, there are some things we may not want to admit. Your kids are online, whether on a smartphone or on the iPad or on the computer. And we have to look at the antecedents and reasons behind that, and then we'll talk about the adolescent brain, how it's very different. So here's the key. Are we fearful? Are we more fearful? Why are we fearful? We, irrespective of your background, means whether you think we evolved from animals or apes, or you think we, from a biblical perspective, we were put on earth to procreate and create a life for ourselves by God. Whatever your background is in your thinking, I'm not here to dispute it, because that's your background. What I'm here to tell you is that whether you were recreated, created, or put here, human beings are different from animals in one function only, that is executive functioning. That executive functioning is morality, right from wrong, and abstract functioning, which means the difference between a chimp, which is 99.9% similar DNA to us, because they feel, they sense, they climb, is right from wrong, morality, and understanding abstract functioning. Part of that abstract functioning is sensible. So somebody attacking you doesn't necessarily mean that you attack them back. Somebody arguing with you doesn't mean you argue them, just like animals do. Animals, you claw, they claw back. You bite, they bite back, or they hurt you. That's the whole difference. So the brain was created to be sensible. So why has this sensible brain become fearful? Why? Reason one is that from an evolutionary perspective, we are genetically hardwired now to make snap decisions as opposed to sensible ones. You hear somebody has committed a crime or somebody in your neighborhood has done something, automatically, I knew, that's what they do. So whether it's border, whether it's a certain aspect of a population, or whether it's a mentally ill deranged shooter, we make snap decisions versus sensible ones. When you go home and you have a parent who's older, and your parent says, it doesn't make a difference what race you are. I told you these people were terrible. They should have been never let in this country. You're the reason. Who says, Mom, don't say that. People are going to listen. What's wrong with you? You're the sensible one. But what research has shown is that that sensible one is becoming more like the mom and dad and predisposed to fear, even though you did not have to live through it. And that fear is this: snap decisions. We adapt to avoid the bad, then seek out the good. I have a news flash for you. You were created as human beings to seek out the good, not to avoid the bad. The whole point of having prefrontal cortex, cerebral cortex, is not to fear and say, okay, I'm not going to go there because I'm going to get killed, is to go and help. That's how society was created. You had children, you help raise up children, you farm, you develop that. But we live in an area in which it's comfortable for you to wake up in the morning and to say, I'm going to work, not to do good, but I'm going to avoid getting a ticket, I'm going to avoid speeding. So you're avoiding bad things as opposed to doing good things. So the brain has reversed in its thinking to thinking that we avoid the bad, it's comfortable to avoid the bad, then seek out the good. Because fear strengthens memory. And on top of that, if constantly media, news is all bad news, you presuppose that all news that you see is the total truth. That's also if you're addicted to a certain channel. Then all you see is that. Now, on top of that, if that news has violent imagery and dreadful events, which heightens your risk perception and to think, oh my God, I'm going to die. We're all going to die. Here's the reality. Reality is we live at a time when we're the safest in history with respect to homicides, violence against women, violence against children, and war. Statistically, we're the safest. Yet, we feel the most unsafe. We felt safer post 9/11 than today. We felt safer post-Vietnam, post-World War II. Yet, today, we feel the worst. And that is what has happened. That even though we are statistically safer, we have become hardwired to predispose to fear. And what's fascinating is, when this research was done, they found out in conservative states where the fear is the highest, you know what was the lowest? Make me proud. Somebody tell me now. Yes? What was the lowest? Church membership. So where the church membership dropped, fear heightened. So as children, adolescents, when you were growing up, you had three things protect you from this big-bagged wolf, which is fear, which was mom, society, dad, and your religion. But when you reduce religion, your higher power, prefrontal cortex, lost the ability to think somebody is going to protect me. And that reduced your fear. On top of that, divorce, separation, single families, single moms, single dads, moving away and all that, led to a crisis in which your fear is heightened. And that's what has happened. Now, what other factors? There's a repetition of recycling bad news, which you live in fear and worry constantly. On top of that, now you have an expert coming on TV, doctor, philosopher, good politician. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, horrible time. Are you kidding me? We're dead tomorrow. Someone's going to come into your house and kill you. You're going to be raped, molested, hurt. What Don was talking about, this rape culture and all those things. If you heighten that fear, and he didn't heighten, if you heighten that fear to a predisposed individual, let's say you were a young girl here, and you were, unfortunately a victim of some trauma early on in childhood. Is it okay for you to hear that particular ethnic background is going to climb into your wall tonight and hurt you? Even though you may live in a very classy, upscale neighborhood where the probability of that happening is zero? Fear. And fear is the key. It's fear. You put in mortal fear in you, you have a problem. And also, violent imagery causes arousal and impact threat detection system. This is PTSD. We had a kid in the hospital some time ago who had PTSD from watching 9/11 tapes. He watched 9/11 tapes, which were the bodies flying from the towers. He could not get it out of his head. PTSD, threat detection system. And availability bias. Availability bias means, fundamentally, you see it long enough times, you're going to believe it. If you hear it long enough, the brain codes it, and your susceptible brain doesn't think what's logical, what's not logical. It believes what it hears. And that leads to this fear. So if we are predisposed to fear, as opposed to predisposed to love, I feel that, was that the Woodstock? No, love. I'm not going back to Woodstock, but what I'm saying is that if you fear, and I'll tell you something, I see a lot of kids every single day. I treat them and I help them. This fear is paramount. It's scary. And I'll tell you, I'm lucky. I have kids. I'm lucky I'm not my kid. I'm not my kid. And sometimes I don't tell them, but I tell their mom, you know, I don't know if I could handle it. I don't know if I could handle it. I'm not saying I was a perfect kid. I was not saying I wasn't picked on. I'm smaller, I'm shorter. Everybody who's short gets picked on in school. But I think I excelled. Because I think going back home, I knew I was better than what somebody said, and I excelled. But if I did not have that comfort, which can be friend, family, environment, culture, religion, society, you lose that contact, you become fearful. And when it all talks about gun control, I'll explain it to you why this fear is the key. So, heterogeneity of violence. What is violence? I'm going to give you a simple example. People come on TV and say, oh, all these mentally ill people should be locked up. There should be a database of these people. Lock them up. No. If you describe mentally ill people, violence is 3 kinds. One is psychotic violence, which is, I'm going to pick on somebody here, my friend here. She's hearing voices telling her, if you don't kill you, everybody is going to die. It's a delusion, fixed belief. So she has to kill her to save everybody else. It's a logical scheme of events. That's psychosis. 20% of violence is that. Hallucinations, delusions. Psychopathy. What is it? Con man, hitman, pure business. Here's $10,000, knock him off. Go ahead. Business as usual, no arousal, gain in mind, no remorse. Perfect business enterprise, business transaction, kill him. Planned, predatory, proactive, lethal. No issue with that. Happens every day, everywhere. Impulsive. You piss me off, I'm going to kill you. That's the most. You drive today, part of you is fearful. Oh shit, if I'm going to drive at 90 miles an hour, or if I rear end somebody or tailgate somebody, I'm going to get killed. He's going to come after me. That's your impulsive fear. Precipitated by provocation, autonomic arousal, anger, fear, emotional, respond to stress. Don't cut me off. I had a patient in the hospital, schizophrenic patient, harmless. Schizophrenics are harmless, 95% of the time, who lived in Kings Park. And you know what he does for a living is, you know those handlers which take those carts, the Kmart carts, grocery carts? It was raining heavily, and he has hood on his head. And also, he always hears voices, so the hood was covering the voices. So poor guy, all his job is go collect the carts and put them near the grocery store. And it was raining badly, and accidentally, he didn't hit anybody. A car was driving by and stopped in the middle of the rain. And his carts stopped shy of the car, did not touch the car. And a woman came out of the car in Kings Park and started berating him. Called him a racial name, derogatory name, you should leave the country, why are you here, all of the above. And the schizophrenic patient that he is tells her, lady, you don't know me. And he said he had water all over his hair with a hood. You don't know me, please walk away, my voice is, I can't handle loudness. She didn't give up. She berated him, and finally she hit him. Not with a pocketbook or whatever it is, I pushed him away, and he lost it. And he reacted. Fear arousal, reacted. It took 17 police officers to control him and taser him. In all his lifetime, he has never been once assaulted. Finally, he came to the hospital. I looked at him the next day, and I asked what happened. He said, I told the lady, and he was crying. I told the lady, please do not. You know, he has his own chatter in his head, and that's what happens. So, you know, unfortunately, sometimes you do and being provoked and get a reaction, but for the most part, impulsive ones are the ones who react like that. And that's part of the violence spectrum. So in your clinics, in your hospitals, schools, clinics, this is what you have to worry about, kids. Who is psychotic? Very minimal kids. You probably will never see a psychotic kid in your class. Okay? Psychopathy, very rare. Mostly what you will see is impulsive kids. So your grade, now your criteria is, oh my God, should I say something or should I not say something? Should I call the mommy or daddy, let them know this is a risk factor, and then take it from there. So, interestingly, what I just said is not Dr. Phil. This is actual fact. And what is the fundamental fact? The fundamental fact is that we have a brain. I'm going to use you as an example and you as an example. Your brain is constantly telling you, yes, commit the crime. Somebody pisses you off, you kill them. That's the limbic system. Because you were created to survive. Back when there were dinosaurs and saber-toothed tigers and all that, if you didn't think like that, you would be dead. You'll be somebody's meal. So you had to survive. So before he killed you, you had to kill him, or her, for that matter. That's it. Then cerebral cortex came in, reason came in, and reason said, this is a puppy. It's a Pomeranian, 4 pounds. He's not going to kill you. That's not poison. Love him up. Don't break his neck. Don't kill him. That's a baby. That's cortical control. So this battle in our head is constant between cortical control, no, do not do it, reason, religion, grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunts, don't, school teachers, psychologists, doctors, limbic system, fear, amygdala, violence, violence, violence. You had to survive to kill. This is all based on biological correlates, which is testosterone, high T, football players, bulked up, high T, I want to be a man. You're 55, yet you still want to be 21. You want to prove it to the world that you can handle it, even though there's no reason to handle it. Or low cortisol at a molecular level. It's all biological. So your urge to hurt, to commit actual violence, is based in the limbic area, which is the same area where you are threatened or you feel threatened. If there's an earthquake right now and these lights start moving, all you're going to be aroused, not in a deviant way, in a mechanical way to run away from the exit. Imagine me standing at the exit saying, no, you can't leave. Threat detection goes up, up, up. Then who's the mildest, smallest person here? Probably you. You're going to push me out of my way, even though, imagine I was 6'8", 6'9", 300 pounds. You will not see any reason, because that you want to survive. That's threat detection system. Rambo, remember Rambo, First Blood? That's PTSD. That's threat detection system. So you want to run. Little GABA, increased glutamate, increased ACTH. And low 5-HT, increased dopamine, norepinephrine. Cocaine, depression, high T, depression, GABA, glutamate, acetylcholine. In people who commit violence, either this is higher, stronger, immature, cognitively impaired, depressed, irritated, or this is less and this is higher, or this is less, this is higher, or the reverse. That's what happens. You get violence. So it's not what politicians say. It's actually based on fundamental biological facts. So what about disorders? Which disorders cause violence or have predisposed to violence? Look at schizophrenia. In schizophrenia, there's a higher violence, but almost 5% of schizophrenics are potential for violence. 95% are harmless. 10% risk versus 2% in the population. More schizophrenic women are violent than men. Funny? Schizophrenic brain in women is like a man's brain. Like, there's a difference between men's and women's brain. It is reversed. Patterns and structures are reversed. So that's why they're more violent. They got a man's brain. Are men more violent? Yeah. And what's funny is that sexual unmorphism, which means it is changed. Here I'm going to show you an example. See my hand? This little finger is always the longest, followed by the first finger, index finger, or the ring finger. Then the pinky is the smallest, correct? This is what schizophrenic hand looks like. Check your hands, make sure you're not schizophrenic. Okay? In utero, if there's testosterone exposure, increased testosterone or low testosterone, increased estrogen and low testosterone, this pointy finger, first finger, is more elongated, and this is smaller, the ring finger. So it becomes like this. So this finger becomes smaller, this becomes longer. It's actually due to elevated estrogen or low testosterone in schizophrenic. People have predicted this to now be a signature for violence. And cognitive dysfunction, here's going back, cognitive dysfunction, inability to control the limbic urge. What's the urge? Urge, I want to hurt you. Or in case of women, I want to sexually hurt you. You know, it's the urge to hurt. It's not the act. It's not the act. It's the urge to hurt, power, get over you. And that's what the beginning. So the limbic cortex says hurt, hurt, hurt. Hurt can be physically hurt or sexually hurt or whatever that may be. Now, mood disorders, bipolar disorder, mood disorders, psychosis, SUD, substance use, ADHD, PTSD, all norepinephrine, increased testosterone, low serotonin, low cholesterol. It seems like if you lower serotonin and cortisol, elevated norepinephrine, testosterone, which is seen in substance abuse like cocaine and all those things, you're at high risk for predisposition. Fascinating child abuse. If you expose a child to abuse, there are neurological changes in the brain, actual neurological changes. People have done research and seen that there's something in the brain called alleles, which is short strands, long strands. If you actually abuse a child, the strands are shortened. And what happens is that not only are there low cortisol levels, abnormal neural activity, altered stress response, HPA axis, and these are the genetic codes which happen with child abuse. Fascinating. You're predisposed genetically for violence. You're abused because your parent probably is mentally ill. It's a double whammy. And you're predisposed to violence now, later on in life. So as social workers or psychologists or teachers, you're so frustrated with the child who you're trying to help, but he's not getting it. There's so much threat detection, arousal and system isn't there. It's because genetically they're hardwired now to respond that way. And you're so frustrated because you don't know why aren't they getting better. The key element from what I'm saying is that you abuse it. I see kids in the hospital who have been trafficked. I saw a kid who was sold for $200 out of the back of a minivan in Manhattan. $200. I guess that's what the guy wanted. I mean, whatever it is. It's frightening. And trafficked all the way, Jersey, Arizona, all the way to Rochester. And the abuse they go through, and you go home and you hug and kiss your kids, and your kid says, "Hi, Daddy, I love you." You know, you kind of, from a sociological perspective, you wonder, oh my God, but by the grace of God, am I so thankful? You know, but it happens. And my point as a doctor is, that kid is somebody's kid. Somebody's kid. I'm glad for that moment it's not my kid, but when I saw the particular person, I couldn't help think it's somebody's kid. Somebody's mommy, somebody's daddy, somebody's baby. Somebody's baby. And that's what the reality is. So child abuse is one huge risk factor. Substance abuse has a disinhibiting effect. You're drunk, DWI, you're high on coke, you're high on drugs, you don't know reason. Cortical disinhibition. So the limbic system is aroused, cortex can't say no. And last but not the least is genetic. These are genetic alleles which predispose you, both in males and females, to violence. So there is some genetic understanding that somebody are pre-programmed or predisposed for this particular violence. So, kids. This is all the background on violence. How are kids affected? Why should kids be affected? How is the adolescent brain different? Is it different? Yes, it's different. As girls, didn't you say the boys are immature? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. You're right. Your mommy was right. Your grandma was right. Boys are immature. And that's the reality. Boys, adolescents, peak onset of violence in adolescence is age 16. The good news is only 20 continue into adulthood to be violent. And the better news is only 50% of those 20% continue after 2 years. That's the good news. The other good news is graded development. They don't start by getting a gun and shooting somebody. They start with petty theft, petty violence, smaller violence, incremental violence. Somebody steals $1, then it's 10, then it's 100, then it's 1,000, then it's 10,000. You don't go to the bank wall the first day. So it starts with a knife, baseball bat, then some violence, like maybe against animals, maybe against peers. Then it grades towards robbing a 7-Eleven or something like that. Then it reaches the gun potential. The third one is adolescents like, what's that movie in which they go to Thailand and Vegas? The wolf pack. Hangover. Hangover effect. Hangover, they hunt in wolf packs. Adolescents always hunt in packs. They're immature and they're impulsive. Case in point, Halloween. We have so many kids post-Halloween in the hospital and they get trapped. The real criminals run. The poor guy gets caught. So what did you do? Nothing, I was just in the car. Because he was part of the wolf pack. It's great being part of the wolf pack. Especially if you're impulsive. And there's a genetic reason for that. One genetic reason is what you told boys in high school. You're immature. Their brains are immature. Because the limbic system, the drive to be violent, matures before the cortex. Okay? So the myelination is still happening, which means it's ripening later on. So the drive to be violent or the drive to procreate and survival for the fittest is there, but the drive to tell you, that's terrible, don't do it, is still being myelinated. That's why girls mature earlier. That's why they show more maturity earlier. Although, clinically speaking, in the last 25 years, I have seen more girls become violent now than ever. Yeah, and I've seen more girls lose it now, and I would never see that. You know, I always saw Mean Girls, even from my high school. I remember Mean Girls, but now I see absolute violence, which sometimes the boys look at it and say, gee, Dr. Khan, she's really a 10. I have my own scale with my patients, and they say it, I'm a 2, I'm a 10. Once in a while, the girls will come in who like skinned a raccoon on 24, alive, and the boys will say, gee, Doc, that's a 10. Ain't never seen that. And sometimes we share stories, talk about old times. The kid will say, Doc, I'm not that bad, you know that. That one was really bad. It was really bad. The kids say this. The kids say this. And what's funny is this. Limbic system lack of impulse control, and they also offend in groups and impulse, and because they overvalue immediate rewards. They overvalue immediate rewards, which is fundamentally that you come with us, we're going to reward you by being our friend. And that is what Don was talking about. The wolf pack. You're part of the pack. What is that he called the square of masculinity or something like that? That's what it is. Environment, socioeconomic deprivation. Imagine you're a kid, single mom, 8 kids. You're out of control. She has to save the other 6. You end up in foster care or wherever it is. And then you end up going somewhere, abuse, neglect, social deprivation. I see those kids. No mom, no dad, no grandpa, no grandma. You're by yourself, period. And I try to engage him. I call the hook. What hook do I have except me? I'm the only hook. And I may be a very good hook sometimes. I may be a terrible hook sometimes. I may be a okay hook sometimes, but I'm not a permanent hook. They lack that anchor. They lack those hooks. And that leads to violence. Of course, so abuse, neglect, and family disruption. Group membership, gangs. I used to see kids Far Rockaway. Hey, dude, what's up? Whoa, no problem, Dad. Yeah, no problem, Dr. Khan. What's going on? Are you in a gang? What else do you expect me to do? How am I going to survive? Straight up answer. You see a kid from Bayshore? Are you in a gang? No. Tell me the truth. What do you want me to say? But I'm not that bad. I'm a tiny bit bad. It's part of the culture is to get accepted by that. Now, peer pressure, low IQ, wronged by society. A lot of people here are wronged by society. They feel wronged. I shouldn't, it's not me. It's us against them. And unfortunately, the rhetoric now politically is also that adds to the conversation. Mental illness. Adolescents, 40 to 60% of kids who are in jail have one illness or the other, which means there was an illness which could have been treated. So this is why adolescents are at risk and are susceptible. So, guns. It's a good topic and a horrible topic at the same time. I wish we did not have this topic. But just looking at it from a top-down perspective, 9.8 million people in this country are severely mentally ill, 2.5 million substance abuse, 1.9 no insurance, 3.1 no treatment, 100,000 homeless, 1 million are in jail. What about guns? Gun violence. We average 30 to 40,000 deaths a year. Interestingly, 61% are suicides, 36% are homicides, 2 are police-rated, 1 are unintentional. It seems like there's an American nomenclature. Just like apple pie, we Americans love guns. 30 to 40% of all the handguns in the world, pistols, are in the US amongst civilians. 30 to 40% of handguns, pistols, are actually in the US among civilian hands. Okay, constitutional right. Which country has a constitutional right in the world to carry a handgun? How many countries? No, there's 3. One is United States. The other is Guatemala. Yeah, Guatemala. Some people don't even know it's a country. It's south to us. Third is your good old Mexico. But guess what? Only one country, you'll like this one, only one country has the right to carry a gun with no conditions, and that's US. Guatemala has the highest murder rate. That's why the Constitution allows them to carry a gun to protect themselves. But even then, there are regulations there. You have to pass the test. Local police test, then a psych test, or whatever that may be. Mexico, because of gangs, has the right constitutionally to carry a gun. But you have to apply for a gun. 99% of the chance you get denied because you can't pass that test. But this is the only country where you have the right to carry a gun with no conditions. So we are an excellent company, US of A, Guatemala, and Mexico. Fascinating. Other countries, like Australia, had similar laws till 15 years ago. Wiped them out. Wiped them out, said, no, we're not going to allow it. So the risk of, we in US, how many, 20 people here, 25 people in there? 1/3 of all your homes have guns. 50 million Americans own 300 million guns. 50 million, 300 million guns. Yes, did you say, oh my God? Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to walk around my neighborhood. Go to every house. 1/3 of them have guns. I'm going to tell you something. I have very good friends in the community. A couple of them are very high-end, intelligent, smart, high earners, not by any means impoverished or desperate people. When this thing, political thing happened, I do this, you know, all the time, some of the time, nationally, internationally, I teach, educate. I don't talk politics at home, I don't talk guns at home, no, nothing, but they know where I stand. So I asked one of them, I said, what do you have? Oh, AR-15 or whatever that is. I said, dude, why do you need it for? Oh, for protection. Against who? You know, one day they're gonna come. Who is they? I'm not kidding you. This is my dinner table conversation with a friend of mine. Who's they? You know. I actually thought I was in La La Land. Maybe I was psychotic. This is a real mainstream person. Not mentally ill, not psychotic, not from Tennessee, not from Texas. This is right in my heartland, next to my house. Second one, same conversation. What do you mean? I have the right. You have the right, absolutely. Why? What's the logic? You live in $1 million home. Who's coming to rob you? Oh, you never know. They're going to come one day. Go and talk to your husbands tonight. Guarantee you 1/3 of them will say the same thing that guy told me. It's as frightening as the rape culture. It's as frightening as the male privilege, he called it. It's as frightening as anything else. So my wife yells and screams at me, why do you open your mouth? Don't talk. You're an idiot. They're not going to come again. They're going to come. They're going to come, and they do come. But I just shut my mouth now. So the risk of homicide is threefold, and the risk of suicide is fivefold if there's a gun in the house. Simple. Simple math. If you have a gun, or it's funny, Thanksgiving, we were at a dinner. The dinner table, and something came up, and somebody asked me a question. I didn't want to answer because I dumb myself down when I'm around social gatherings. Really like, what do you call it? Like, you know, I don't know anything. Kick me, I'll roll over. I have no knowledge, no brain. I'm like, yeah, what? You know, that's how I act now, socially. You know, but that's an act. It's an act. It's an intentional act so that nobody can know what I'm thinking. And they started kicking me psychologically, and then I snapped. So I snapped, and I took a picture of my phone, on my phone, a picture which had these statistics written down, not by me, this is mine, statistics, that if you have a gun in the house, the probability is this, that you are going to die by that gun. The probability is this, that your child is going to kill himself by that gun. The probability is this, the child is going to shoot the sibling. The probability is this, that they're going to go after a neighborhood. The probability is this, that if they see a non-white person in the neighborhood who's selling candy, chocolates, they're going to shoot him. Probabilities. And I couldn't stop it, and I just said, read this. They all turned white, ashen white. They were all white. Became more white. I can't even become white even if I want to. So, you know, and that's the whole point. Couldn't believe it. The probability of your baby, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, taking that gun and killing themselves or somebody else is so high, all because there's a gun in the house. You're going to love these things, the homicide, the suicide. Now, mass shootings. Why did I talk about the limbic system earlier? Mass shooters, 77% of them have had a plan for at least a week, which we know. Display 4 to 5 behaviors on a scale. There's a scale for mass shooters. Who's going to commit a mass shooting? If I do a scale on all of us, maybe I'll have 1, maybe you'll have 2, maybe you'll have none, maybe you'll have 2, 3. Guarantee you somebody will have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 if we poll the whole of Hofstra. That means the risk factors are there, but nothing was done. 44% feel aggrieved aggrieved. Remember the guy, impulsive guy, aggrieved, feel threatened? That's what this is. Socially isolated, paranoid. 50% are suicidal. They want to kill people, but they also want to kill themselves. I had 3 kids in the hospital last year who were all shooters. You don't know about it because they come to daddy. They come to Papa. Papa takes care of them, fixes them, medicates them. You don't hear about it. That's why we're clean. That's because in New York, we are tough. We have tough laws, and we have good sense parents most of the time. Not all the time. We have schools which don't tolerate bullshit. We have schools which have no problem now putting their foot down and say, go and see him. You're not coming back to me. There was 3 shooters at the same time. One was a girl, by the way. The girl actually had the audacity to wear a trench coat and wear a hat. Take a gun, a pistol. You know, outside the school zone, there's a no-gun zone sign, in which there's a gun and there's a cross against it. Stands against that and goes like this. Sends that picture to everybody in the school. You're next, you're next, you're next, you're next. She thought this was Tennessee or Oklahoma. She didn't know this is New York. Within seconds, the police were at her home. Suffolk County DA picked her up, shackled her. Whoa. And her parents were like, no, not my kid. I said, yes, your kid. Yes, your kid. You can yes me to death. Once you cross that red line, there's no coming back. And we did what we had to do. So from that perspective, only in mass shootings, only 1/4 have a mental illness. Almost everybody else has mood, anxiety, psychosis, or autism. International, you're going to love this. You're going to love this statistic. Love it. We have 97 guns for 100 people in the US. You know, Europe has 17 guns per 100 people. And here's the clincher. The violent crime rate is the same in US, France, Germany, Japan, or even Canada. 5.5, 6.3. Guess what the homicide rate is in US? 3 to 4 times higher than industrialized countries. Why? Guns. So elsewhere, violent crime is the same. I entered your house. I apologize. I entered your house. Violent crime. I have a knife. Same crime, 5.5% all over the United States, Canada, Germany, all that. But in US, I have a gun. So the homicide rate is 3 times that I'm going to kill somebody. So the distinguishing feature, and this is what ultimately it is 17 versus 97. Assaults are 3 times higher to involve a gun in the US. Nationally, only 3 to 5% of American crimes are committed by mentally ill people, and less than 5% of gun crimes are committed by mentally ill people. You're going to love this one. Florida. Remember we spoke about Florida earlier when we saw the videotape, Parkland? And now they have guns in schools. In 2005, Florida passed Stand Your Ground law. I think we should cut Florida from US. If I could snip it and send it somewhere else. You know, reality, Stand Your Ground, 2005, and guess what happened? The next year, the number of fatalities, 200% increase in interpersonal conflicts resolved by fatal shootings, which means if the domestic violence happened in 2004, husband and wife had a spat, husband left home, got drunk, did what he had to do, blow off steam, came back the next morning, or slept on the couch, or woman left, went to her mom's house, sister's house. That's how, or worst case, still physical violence. Somebody got hurt and all that. 2005, guns became Stand Your Ground. They started shooting each other. There was a 2,000% increase in rate of fatalities. Fatal shooting, somebody died. Now the same state gives guns in school, and the same school people go home. Now let's see the stats from next year. This is Stand Your Ground. Cultural, racial determinants. When we debriefed FBI documents after the civil rights, we found out that FBI intentionally had labeled Malcolm X and all the other people involved with NAACP as violent schizophrenic criminals. Violent schizophrenic. So to tell the other folks that don't give them guns. because that was the time when they had to decide whether access to guns would happen or not. So there are intentional racial determinants. We want to keep the guns away from them, us versus them. And reality is that we still hear this today. If a black guy shoots somebody, it's black culture that's to blame. It's the culture. If it's a white guy, oh, he's mentally ill, or he was abused, neglected, horrible mother, horrible father. And that's the racial determinants. I can't change it. I'm not a sociologist, but it's just something that happens and we have to change it. So all these shootings, what's the impact on kids? Why are we worried about kids? Here's the now impact on your kid and my kids. 1 in 4 children and adolescents experience neglect, abuse, are predisposed to violence. United States ranks 18th of the 21 Western countries in overall well-being. You know what that means? 18 out of 21. We used to talk about infant mortality, postpartum stuff, infectious diseases. We're 18th in well-being. Forget math. Google it. Forget math. Forget science. Forget infrastructure, calculus, algorithms. Forget that. We're way behind there. I'm not saying we're not the best country. We still are the best country in the world. But in terms of well-being for children, and somebody rightly said years ago, the level of a society, measure of a society, is by how it treats its children and elderly. And in this country, when you look at the well-being of elderly and the well-being of children, both, self-report, not my report, self-report is terrible. So that's a measure of our society. US, 6% of students missed 1 day of school because they feel unsafe. 5% of high schools have carried a gun in the last 1 month. 5%. And that is reported. Results. Gunfire has become the leading cause of death. Child is shot every 31 minutes. Children's death exceed 6,500 in Germany and largely due to gun violence. Adolescents are 40 times more likely killed by gunfire in the US than all the other countries combined. I have a 12-year-old. He's going to be an adolescent. God forbid, he has a probability in US to be shot 40 times more than anywhere else in the industrial countries. Oh, of course. Okay, oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Rate of firearm is 6 times higher for adolescents, and guns cause yearly 4,000 yearly deaths. Moving on. I just put this in quickly. TV violence, cyberbullying, violent video games. Violent video games and TV do not cause violence, but they add to it. So average kids today watch 4 hours of TV a day. It's a contributing factor. It alters threat detection system. They become immune and numb to violence, accept violence, imitate violence. And this game, Prescott shows 1,700 participants showed later aggression. Here's the fascinating part. Out of all the races, the people who are affected most by video games is Caucasians. Guess what? Hispanics, 0. No effect. Don't ask me why. Maybe it's the food. Something is there, it's not a contributing factor. And amongst Asians, second. China and Taiwan have called them internet addiction disorders now, gaming disorders. They're banning these things in some areas. Cyberbullying happens a lot. It has doubled in the last 10 years. Here's your middle school students, cyberbully 24%. 45% of middle schools have been bullied on school property. 45%. What? Risk, minorities, LGBTQ, obviously, very high risk. Here's the risk factors. If you are an authoritarian parent, please don't be an authoritarian parent. Probability is your child will bully somebody. Because what comes around goes around. You bully somebody, they will bully somebody else. Or they may feel bullied. Poor emotional bond, low ability regulation, low peer attachment, lack of training of educators, poor knowledge and awareness of social norms. So, what's the treatment? The treatment is basically, first you understand what the problem is. Second is that clinical judgment. Prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. You know, it's hard. Even as a forensic child psychiatrist, I can predict, but I'm not 100% accurate. But guess what my prediction is? My gut. First, my gut, which is my clinical judgment, and the risk factors. And those risk factors are these. Static risk factors, permanent risk factors: male, young, poor, low IQ, history of violence, criminal history. Current factors: access to guns, lack of conflict resolution, lack of support, current violent ideation, and current substance abuse. And your other factors are your head injury, concussion, TV violence, genetic factors, bullying, domestic violence, child abuse, untreated mental illness. So from law enforcement perspective, from mental health perspective, sociology perspective, community perspective, it's our shared priority of safety. Psychiatric, treat them psychiatrically. Every day I see patients in the hospital, parents give me a hard time. No, not my kid, not my kid. There's nothing wrong with him. Meanwhile, Johnny, Jill, Jane, psychotic as hell, very disturbed, autistic, ADHD, social phobia, anxiety, smoking marijuana every single day. Marijuana causes psychosis. The joint you smoked 20 years ago, if you smoked it today, you'll be in Brunswick Hospital. It is toxic to the brain. It's a permanent impairment. I've seen irreversible psychosis from marijuana. The marijuana now is synthesized. It's not recreated from the ground. Social support, inner city youths. Violent video games, restrict them as it reduces empathy and increases aggression. Support the family of the people who are mentally ill. Gun safety, remove all guns where kids are, know the risk of the gun, store the gun separately and ammo separately, trigger locks while cleaning the gun. I'm going to say something here which I agree with NRA. I'm not in agreement with NRA's policies. There is some logic to say that if you're in the middle of nowhere, that you fear something's going to happen, that you need a gun to protect yourself. The Constitution gives you the right. But the Constitution does not say that a psychotic, deranged, impulsive, drug-addicted, autistic, low IQ, low cognitive impairment kid should have access to a gun. I'm full agreement. 90% of gun owners, you would not even know they're gun owners. That's the point of being a gun owner. So okay, maybe you're paranoid and fearful, but the idea is that you can't be that paranoid and fearful to the point of no return. So, just 1 second, gun policy, restrict deprivation of guns, but provide them due process, programs in school, county, and cultural model. This is the whole thing. Love each other, love your society, and don't have a problem. The last slide before we end is a wishbone. This is a compilation of every single thing we spoke about. This talks about all the factors. Wishbone is something, here's your predisposed affair, Gun Violence Act. These are your static factors. Poor IQ, history of violence, criminal history, young and male. This is your current, which will make you do things right away. Current violent ideation, lack of support, supervision, lack of conflict resolution, current impulsivity, and substance abuse. And these are all your other factors. Small, big, medium, small. When you add all these together, you have gun violence. But you could have everything here, and you're not a problem. You're in Hofstra. You hate everybody. You want to kill everybody, but you don't have a gun. I don't care what you do. You'll end up in my hospital. But if you have a gun, there's no rules. So all these are predicated upon this. If this is not available, this is all treatable. Some more than others. If you don't have availability. So my point to you and everybody else is that I'm fully on board with if you want something in a locked cabinet because you fear society, no problem. But it cannot come into contact with these people. These are my people. Leave them to me. Let me deal with them. They cannot have access to guns. You're a normal person, you want a gun, you make you feel better, No issue. Men want to feel better with a gun, like Don said, no problem. But you can't have guns. Simple as that. Thank you very much.